everyone, my name is Lenny and I'm shooting this video for tatsplus.com and I hope you enjoy. Today I'd like to talk about arpeggio. What's an arpeggio? Well, when I first started studying guitar I didn't really know what an arpeggio was, so I'd like to make this clear for everyone, whether you are a beginner or an advanced player. An arpeggio is the sound you get every time you play notes from a chord one after each other rather than simultaneously. And this implies two things. Whenever you will play an arpeggio, you will spell out a chord. And also that you need to know the notes in your chord if you want to play an arpeggio. I'd like to start this simple, just grabbing a G major chord. The notes in a G major chord are basically G, B, and D. Now there are many spots where you can play G, B, and D, but for now I'd like to start with this position. What I want you to do is visualize the notes in this chord, and then we'll take a look at the arpeggio that hides inside of it. So here is our G major bar chord. Now if you want to play the arpeggio, what you need to do is just playing G, B, and D. So on a 6-string guitar, the lowest G you have is here on the 3rd fret of the 6th string. Then you play B and D. Back to G an octave above, B and D. You could reach this higher B here, but for now I'd like you to stay in this position because what you're going to do next is highlights the roots on your shapes on the 6th string, on the 4th string, on the higher string here, and relates every interval to those roots because those roots are going to be the center every time you will play the arpeggio. So again, the G major triad arpeggio. I don't want to suggest a particular fingering for it, but I think you should be able to reach every note with every finger. So I think the best way to practice is probably using sequence. And you could do, for example, a sequence of groups of 4. So starting on G, you play G, B, D, and G, like that. Then you start on B, and you do the same thing. Then you start on D, again the same principle. Once you get to the top, you go back. And once you're comfortable with it, you try to play without stopping between every group. What I'm going to do today is not just give you one arpeggio shape, of course. What I'm going to get to is be able to change arpeggio every time you hear the chord changes. And to develop this skill, you need to start with really common moves, really common progression, like for example a 1-4-5, which happens in every blues you've probably heard. So if we stick to the key of G, the 4 chord, it's C major. And the 5 chord, it's D major. I want you to notice how I stay in the same position while I'm playing the chords. That's because you want to be able to change arpeggio without having to move too much. There are times when you want to move up and down the neck while you improvise, and there are times when you rather stay in a position you know well. So if we start with the C major, the C we have, it's on the 3rd fret of the 5th string here, and the notes are C, E, and G. Same thing with D major triad. You start with your pinky and the notes are D, F sharp, and A. again, you could practice with the sequence, and this time instead of doing groups of 4, you could play, for example, every other note of the arpeggio. So if we start with the C major triad, you play C, and then you skip the E and you play G. Then you're back to E, you skip the G and you play C, like that. Same thing with the D major. So I'd like to focus the attention on minor arpeggio shapes now. And since we're dividing the neck in zone, I think it's a good idea to learn also the parallel minor arpeggios of the one we discussed earlier. We're going to apply the same principle, and since G seems to be the key of the day, we're going to start with the G minor chord. The only difference between a minor chord and a major chord is the third. The major third becomes a minor third, and so in this example, instead of having a B, you have a B flat. So to play the G minor arpeggio, we're going to play G, B flat, and D. Again. You can probably reach this B flat here because it's not a big stretch. So again, the G minor arpeggio. Since we are training ourselves on a 1-4-5 progression for this tutorial, let's now take a look at the C minor. Notes are C, E flat, and G. And D minor. Notes D, F, and A. Again, you should practice those arpeggios with a metronome, of course, and using a sequence. And what's fundamental is that you highlight in your brain the roots and relates every interval, every note to them. So once you have your arpeggio shapes down, what you want to do is apply the concept you just learned. Here I recorded a G major backing track with a 1-4-5 progression, and what I'm going to do is playing the arpeggio on the right chords. So on the G major, I'm going to play the G major arpeggio, on the C major arpeggio, and on the D major arpeggio. What I want you to do is, while improvising, keep tracking of the chord changes and limiting your note choices. So now we're going to apply the minor shape you just learned. What I'm going to do this time is mixing between arpeggio and scale movement. And this is going to sound way more natural, since I bet that every time you play, you're not going to choose between either arpeggio or scales. You're probably going to blend those elements a little bit. What's important is saying that you play a scale move and then a new chord comes up. You probably want to land on either the root, the third, or the fifth of that chord. So again, keep tracking of the chord changes.